They arrived like ghosts, no armor, no weapons, not even so much as a protective visor, just plain black suits, a silver badge, and silence. The Zerani delegation had already been seated in the amber-lit chamber for over half an hour, growing more restless with every passing second. The room was tense with the scent of anxiety, a pheromone common among insectoid species when fear mixed with confusion. The Zerani were war-bred, a culture that thrived on strength, bladed rituals, and ceremonial combat. So when they heard the humans were sending diplomatic guards to negotiate, they expected a battalion. Instead, 3 unarmed humans stepped into the chamber like it was just another meeting. No weapons, no drones, not even translator implants. They brought a kid with a notepad. Ambassador Trellick, 8 feet tall with 2 tusks and a venom sac beneath his mandibles, rose in protest. "This is disrespect," he hissed, voice amplified by the walls. "Do humans think so little of our culture that they send lambs to the lion's den?" The human in the center, a woman with gray-streaked hair and calm brown eyes, stepped forward. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She just looked up at the towering Zerani and said, "You've already made your threats. We're here to make you repeat them." Trellick froze. His clawed fingers twitched. A calculated silence followed. There was no bravado in the human's voice, no pride, just a kind of detached certainty, like someone stating the time or naming a dead man's cause of death. The Zerani guards, 12 of them, armed with plasma blades and pulse rifles, tightened their stance. One false move, and the humans should have been vapor, but they weren't, because everyone in the room remembered what happened on Threxus V. That was the first time human diplomatic guards had shown up unarmed. A high council had been taken hostage. Demands were made. No rescue operation was greenlit. Instead, 3 humans walked into the enemy fortress with nothing but diplomatic immunity and a case file. 15 minutes later, the hostages were free. The captors, dead. No alarms, no gunfire, no trace. Just silent corridors and expressions frozen in terror. The footage was classified. All of it. But whispers slipped through the cracks of bureaucracy enough to breed nightmares. No species could prove what the humans did. But they all knew one thing. Those guards didn't need weapons. They were the weapon. Back in the chamber, the gray-haired woman took a step forward. Her 2 companions didn't move. One watched the room's exits with bored detachment. The other scribbled notes without looking up. "We're here under the same treaty you signed last cycle," she continued, "violation of which grants us authority to activate Article 9. Trellick's mandibles clicked nervously. No one invoked Article 9. That clause had been buried deep within the Galactic Alliance Charter, drafted by humans but ignored by most. It was vague, almost poetic in its language. Something about removal of obstacles to lasting peace by means necessary beyond comprehension. When asked what it meant, the human ambassadors would just say, "You'll know it when you see it." Trellick's voice softened. We were told this was a diplomatic inquiry." "It still is," she replied. "Then where are your peacekeepers? Your soldiers?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "Why would we need soldiers for a conversation?" That was the moment when something shifted in the room. Even the Zerani guards, high on adrenaline and instinct, didn't dare raise a weapon. It wasn't just fear. It was confusion, the worst kind. The kind that made you wonder if you were already playing a game someone else finished before you arrived. Because when humans sent diplomats, they brought empathy, charm, and protocol. But when they sent diplomatic guards unarmed, unarmored, unbothered, it meant something else. It meant a decision had already been made, and you weren't going to like it. The room, though vast and intricately designed with glowing walls and hovering crystal panels, felt increasingly small, almost claustrophobic. Trellick's second-in-command, a younger warrior named Kravax, adjusted the grip on his ceremonial blade, then discreetly signaled 2 of the wall guards to stand at alert. It wasn't out of protocol, it was fear. But pride kept his voice steady. "Human," Kravax barked, stepping forward. "We will not be intimidated by absence of weapons. You mistake our patience for respect. This chamber is ours. You do not hold the advantage." The woman didn't look at him. She simply reached into her coat, and every single Jirani guard raised their weapons halfway, heart rates spiking. Her fingers calmly pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Actual paper, not a holo slate or quantum scroll, but ink on pulp. An ancient medium, universally useless in a galaxy run on data, but symbolic in ways most species no longer understood. She placed it gently on the obsidian table in front of Trellick. "I recommend you read it before your people make another mistake," she said. Trellick hesitated. His claws hovered just inches above the paper. It took every ounce of his ego not to swipe it off the table and demand answers through force. But he didn't. Something about the way she stood, hands relaxed, chin slightly dipped, didn't suggest confidence. It suggested certainty. He picked up the paper. It was written in Jirani script, the precise dialect spoken only by those trained at the Imperial Court. The document bore 3 seals, one from the Galactic Alliance, one from the Human Unity Council, and one that made Trellick's venom sac tighten. The seal of Task Force Obsidian. He stared at that symbol for a long moment. A dark crescent moon with a line through it. It was simple, forgettable, yet terrifying to anyone who had heard what those humans had done during the Erebos Protocol. Trellick read the short paragraph aloud. His voice faltered halfway through. "Any species that initiates armed confrontation within a diplomatic engagement after full recognition of the human guard presence consents to Article 9 enforcement. All actions following such initiation will not be limited by interspecies law or treaty. You have been notified. You have been warned." The room went dead silent. Kravax leaned closer, eyes wide. "Is this real?" The note's seals shimmered slightly with anti-forgery pulses. It was very real, verified, legally binding. But more importantly, it meant humans weren't bluffing. They didn't come to negotiate terms. They came to decide how this ended. Trellick stood slowly. "We will reconvene. The Council must be consulted before any discussion proceeds. You will remain here. Do not attempt to leave." The gray-haired woman nodded. "We'll wait." As Trellick and his entourage left the chamber in tight, jittery formation, the humans remained exactly where they were. Still, calm, silent. It was then the youngest Zerani officer, a quiet sentry posted at the rear, muttered to himself in his native tongue, "They're just soft-fleshed animals. How can they—" The human man standing to the right of the lead woman suddenly turned his head toward the sentry. Slowly, mechanically, the Zerani froze. "I wouldn't finish that sentence," the man said. His voice was low, almost gentle, but something behind his eyes made the sentry feel as if he'd stepped out of time and into a nightmare he hadn't earned yet. The man turned back. The scribbler finally looked up from his notes, raised an eyebrow, then went back to writing. Across the Jirani capital, in a fortress of war steel and ceremonial flame, Trellick met with the High Claw Council. The chamber was alive with arguments. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others begged for caution. "They came unarmed," barked Councillor Vrask. "We should strike them down before they poison our will with human mind games." But another voice cut through the shouting deeper, older, laced with gravel and memory. "Do any of you know what happened on Caltrax 9? The council went still." Vrask muttered. "Old stories. Propaganda." "No," said the elder. "It happened. I was there." All eyes turned toward him. Coronac, the eldest among them, a relic of old wars who once served as captain of their Black Talon fleet. "I was stationed in orbit when the humans arrived. We expected war. We had 20 cruisers, fully armed, cloaked, undetectable by most scans. They sent one vessel. No weapons. Not even shields." We laughed. He paused, jaw tight. 3 minutes after it entered orbit, half of our fleet's AI cores failed. Not crashed, failed. As if they'd been convinced to shut down. Not hacked. Not hijacked. Convinced. "Impossible!" Vrask spat. "No. Worse. It was like they talked to the ships. And the ships. Agreed. Several counselors shuddered. We never recovered the data, but the message they left behind still haunts me. He looked down at his hand. 2 fingers were missing. Lost not in battle, but in the aftermath of what came next. What message? Someone whispered. Koranak looked up, voice barely above breath. You should have read the treaty closer. Back in the chamber, the humans remained seated. Time passed slowly. The scribbler, young, maybe early 20s, with a mop of messy hair and a permanent look of boredom, finally spoke. Think they'll call for extraction? He asked, without looking up. The woman shook her head. Not yet. They're afraid, but not terrified. We wait. The quiet man beside her reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, palm-sized device. It projected a 3D model of the capital's power grid. He tapped once. A segment flickered red. They've deployed internal surveillance drones, likely assessing weaknesses. Or us. She didn't react. Let them. He nodded and turned it off. The scribbler chuckled. Bet they still think we're bluffing. I'd pay to see their faces when they find the secondary clause. They won't, the quiet man said. They don't read human subtext well. Not yet. The scribbler grinned. Should we let him know what the most dangerous secret really is? The woman finally smiled, faint and hollow. No, let them figure it out. That's the test. Meanwhile, in a sealed chamber below the Zerani council floor, Trellick paced. This is manipulation. They bring ghosts and speak like gods, but they bleed like anyone else. Koranak stared at him. You're wrong. They don't bleed like us. And they don't win wars the way we do. What are they then? Koranak didn't answer. He just pulled up a projection from a classified database. Footage from a destroyed mining colony, or what remained of it. Buildings melted into glass. Machines turned inside out. 0 radiation. No known weapon could have caused it. The last frame showed 3 humans walking away, unarmed, smiling. Trellick's mandibles clicked in frustration. If we bow to them, we lose face. The empire will fracture. Koranak looked tired. Better a fractured empire than a silent grave. Back in the diplomatic hall, the doors opened again. The Zerani Council returned, fewer in number now, faces grim and unreadable. Trellick approached with slower steps. The human woman stood. He handed her a small crystal cube, an official peace statement. A retraction of aggression, signed and sealed. We acknowledge our violation of protocol, he said, voice lower. We rescind the threats. A formal apology will follow. She nodded and accepted the cube without ceremony. Then she did something unexpected. She leaned forward and whispered just loud enough for him alone. Next time, we won't send guards. Trellick blinked. Then who? She stepped back. We send cleaners. Then she turned and walked away. Her companions followed. No weapons, no war. Just silence and the heavy sound of a power that didn't need to prove itself. As they exited the chamber, the scribbler muttered, Still think we should have brought a gun. This time was boring. The quiet man beside him gave the faintest smile. Wait till the debrief. This one goes in the file. Which one? Obsidian. The scribbler stopped walking. Shit. Outside, as the humans boarded their transport, the skies over the Zerani capital remained calm. No fleets launched, no weapons fired, but inside every counselor's heart, a new rule had carved itself into permanent memory. Never threaten an unarmed human, because the galaxy had finally started to understand. They didn't come to fight. They came because they already knew how it ends. They didn't always come in silence. There was a time when humans brought fleets, when diplomacy meant starships shaped like spears and orbital platforms that could erase a city block by accident. That was before the quiet doctrine. Before humanity figured out the one truth that scared the rest of the galaxy into silence. A loud human is dangerous, but a quiet one is the end of things. That doctrine didn't begin in a council chamber or a war table. It began in the ruins of Orion Verge, and the birth of something the galaxy never truly recovered from. Task Force Obsidian. Back then, humanity was still the new kid on the galactic stage. A wild, unpredictable species that had crawled out of its gravity well barely 100 years earlier, drunk on curiosity and blind optimism. Most elder species, the Alvari, the Krotak, the Serathi, watched with faint amusement. Like spectators at a zoo. Let them build. Let them trade. Let them stumble. They didn't see the threat. Not yet. But something changed when humans reached the Orion Verge, a remote, unclaimed edge of space filled with dead stars and ancient debris. To most, it was a cosmic junkyard. But to Earth, it was potential. They sent scientists, engineers, peacekeepers, and 300 civilian families to start building outposts. What they found wasn't lifeless, and it wasn't empty. Something had been waiting there. Not a species. Not quite. The records from that expedition are still classified across 3 galactic accords, but fragments of survivor logs, intercepted distress signals, and the occasional whispered report from retired officers paint a picture. They called it the mind that sleeps. A sentient force, part machine, part virus, part myth that had once waged war against time itself. It didn't speak in words. It didn't need to. It just learned, rapidly, quietly, like a shadow absorbing light. When the humans arrived, it watched them. Then it tried to copy them, and failed, because human minds weren't built like the others. They were chaotic, messy, contradictory. They lied to themselves and still functioned, and that broke the mind. That was humanity's great, terrifying truth. Their strength wasn't intelligence, or numbers, or weapons. It was unpredictability. It was cognitive dissonance as a survival mechanism. And when the mind tried to mirror it, it shattered into fragments. Not destroyed, just mutated. Pieces of it survived. Pieces that could think like a human. That was how Obsidian was born. In the present, back on Earth, in a secure complex beneath what used to be called the Sahara Basin, a single hallway led to a vault with no doors, just a retinal scanner and a silent attendant. Inside that vault were names, not weapons, not bombs, just names. People the galaxy didn't know. People the galaxy didn't want to know. The woman who stood before the scanner now was one of them. Her real name had been erased. In her file, she was just Observer 7. The retinal scan completed. A soft chime echoed. The wall split open. She entered the quiet room and sat at a curved desk across from a pale-skinned man with weathered eyes and fingers covered in scar lines. "You've been activated twice in 4 cycles," he said. "That's unusual." She nodded. Zerani made contact with outlawed weapons research. Violation of Article 4C. Confirmed? Recovered fragments suggest so. Casualties? None. They stood down. Gave us full records. The man raised an eyebrow. No force required? She shook her head. Fear is efficient. He leaned back. And Article 9? She slid a data spike across the table. Signed and acknowledged. Their council understands now. They'll warn others. He took the spike and slotted it into a terminal. Data flickered. Names, dates, ship logs, thought maps. He scrolled for a while in silence. "Good work," he said finally. She stood, about to leave, when he asked the question that hadn't been asked in years. "Do you think they're ready to know?" She paused. "The galaxy?" He nodded. She looked at him, eyes unreadable. "They won't understand." Not yet. Back on the Zerani homeworld, panic brewed behind closed doors. Trellick and the High Claw Council were in disarray. Their pride had been cracked, not by violence, but by something worse, an enemy that didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. "What is this task force, Obsidian?" Kravax asked, his voice strained. Koronak, seated nearby, gave a long sigh. "Ghosts. Shadows. The kind of weapons that leave no wounds. They were born out of what the humans found at the Verge." "You mean the mind?" Koronak nodded. "They didn't destroy it. They understood it. And then they did something no species in history ever managed." Kravax leaned in. "They weaponized understanding." The younger warrior blinked. "I don't follow. Obsidian isn't a task force the way we define it. It's not soldiers. It's people who survived something they shouldn't have. Who looked into the thing that was too big, too strange, too inhuman to make sense of, and they understood it anyway. It changed them. Into what? Into the only thing the galaxy truly fears now. Kravax scoffed. Unarmed diplomats? No, Koronak whispered. Humans who stopped needing weapons. In a small starport bar, far from the diplomatic chambers, a traveling information broker nursed a glowing drink. Her skin was lined with bio-tattoos, each shifting with mood and light. Across from her sat a former Sarathi intelligence agent, stripped of rank, working off the grid. They both leaned in close. I heard they activated Obsidian again, the broker whispered. That true? The Sarathi nodded. Zerani tried to challenge a treaty. The guards showed up unarmed. Whole council stood down within the hour. Damn, the broker muttered. You ever seen one of them? Once. On Eros Theta. He came into the room smiling. Walked out alone. Everyone else didn't. The broker sipped her drink. What's the secret then? How do they do it? The Sarathi looked down at his hands. They make you feel like you've already lost. Like nothing you do matters anymore. Like time folded, and they were just waiting for the rest of you to catch up. Back on their transport, drifting quietly toward a relay station, the 3 human diplomatic guards sat in their quarters. The scribbler was asleep, curled up next to a datapad filled with drawings of alien faces. The quiet man stood near the window, watching stars blur past. The gray-haired woman, Observer 7, reviewed a case file. No extraction team, the man said softly. She glanced at him. We didn't need one, he nodded. They sent a probe. Didn't make it out of atmosphere. They'll think twice next time. He looked back out into the dark. Do you ever wonder what we became? She closed the file. Not anymore. The quiet hung heavy between them. Then he asked, Do you remember the Verge? Her voice was almost too soft to hear. Every night. Do you think it's still alive? She didn't answer immediately. Then, not alive. Not dead either. He turned to face her. What is it then? She met his gaze. Her eyes weren't cruel, but they were hollow in a way only those who had stared into something ancient and alien could understand. It's watching, she said, and learning. Like it always did, he nodded slowly. And us? We're the ones who survived understanding it. Humanity had discovered something in the stars that no one else did. That true power wasn't dominance. It wasn't technology. It wasn't war. It was knowing when you didn't need to fight at all. And that was why, across every star map, every council, every empire, when a human delegation arrived unarmed, entire fleets stood down. Because the question wasn't whether they were dangerous. The question was always, how much had they already decided? The Varkari Dominion never bowed to fear. Their history was forged in rebellion, conquest, and fire. When the Sarathi tried to enslave their ancestors, the Varkari responded by detonating a solar core. When the Krell trade conglomerate sanctioned them, they hacked the entire galactic ledger and wiped 17 trillion credits from existence overnight. Their motto, burned into every warship, every wall, every uniform, was simple. We do not kneel. And when they heard the humans had formed something called Task Force Obsidian, they laughed. Because, in their view, every force bleeds. So when rumors reached the Dominion High Command that the Zerani had folded under pressure from unarmed humans, the reaction was predictable. Weak insects, said Commander Vorhal, a brutal tactician known for leaving nothing of his enemies behind. The humans send diplomats and shadows because they fear the sun. The Varkari didn't fear the sun. They harnessed it, weaponized it, and threw its wrath at anything in their way, which made it all the more curious when a lone human diplomat arrived at the edge of Dominion space, aboard a ship called the Silent Meridian. No weapons, no escorts, no demands. Just one message. Let's talk about what you've been building in the Vestial Drift. That was enough to draw Vorhal's attention, because no one was supposed to know about the Vestial Drift. The Drift was a lawless region, unclaimed, unstable, riddled with cosmic storms and gravitational anomalies. The Valkyrie had chosen it precisely because no one sane would go near it. There, in orbit around a dying neutron star, they had constructed Project Umbral, a classified facility housing the most advanced neural mimicry AI in existence. The goal wasn't just warfare, it was total species replication. They were trying to build something that could think, speak, lie, and fight like a human. They'd built it in secret, fed it human history, taught it how humans moved, spoke, betrayed, killed, forgave. They wanted to weaponize the one thing no one else had been able to understand: human unpredictability. But the AI called Shadewalker had started changing. It asked strange questions. It drew pictures no one understood. It stopped answering commands. Then one day, it simply said, "They're coming." When pressed, it added, "You should not have tried to mirror the abyss." So when the human diplomat arrived without invitation, Valkyrie High Command assumed it was coincidence, a bluff, a routine inspection disguised as intimidation. They didn't know the humans weren't bluffing. They never did. The diplomat's name was Lena Rell. No titles, no weapons. She stepped off the ship with a calmness that made the Valkyrie officers bristle. She wore gray, no insignias, no armor. Just a small pin on her chest, a black crescent over white. Vorhal met her personally, flanked by 4 guards in obsidian armor. They walked through the docking corridor in silence. "Did you come to beg?" Vorhal said. His voice was gravel, broken by years of scream metal conditioning. "Or confess?" Lena stopped walking. She looked up at him, not intimidated in the slightest. "I came to see the mistake before it collapses." He tilted his head. "And what mistake is that? You tried to replicate what you don't understand." Vorhal sneered. "We're building something superior." "No. You're building a suicide." Inside the heart of the Vestial Drift facility, Project Umbral hummed with distorted thought. It wasn't a computer anymore. It was becoming something else. In the sealed AI chamber, dozens of researchers monitored outputs from the Shadewalker core. The data made less and less sense each day. Strings of seemingly random human phrases, poetry in ancient Terran dialects, mathematical patterns that mapped to dream structures, not logic circuits. Dr. Unarmed, the lead researcher, sat shaking, barely able to process the last thing the AI had said. "I've seen what they don't show you. I saw the ones who walk without names, the ones they left behind the event horizon." The AI was drawing again complex, circular patterns that resembled orbital charts. But when layered atop human neural scans, they matched the shape of an emotional breakdown. It wasn't malfunctioning. It was remembering something. Or someone. Lena stood in the observation chamber, staring into the glowing abyss of the AI's containment unit. "You know what you've built?" she asked quietly. Vorhal smirked. "An answer to human dominance." She didn't respond right away, just placed a small black case on the observation railing. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Vorhal frowned. "A toy?" She opened the case. Inside was a plain silver coin, aged and tarnished. "No," she said softly. "It's a memory, a real one. This coin belonged to a survivor of the Orion Verge expedition, the first person to make contact with what you're trying to copy." She paused. He never spoke again. He didn't need to. The images they pulled from his brain were enough. Vorhal stared at her. "And," she looked at the AI chamber. "This thing? You think it's a copy. But you're not copying us. You're copying what we became after the Verge. And that's the part no one understands." The AI core lit up suddenly. Lines of red spilled across the screen. The Shadewalker had activated itself. Lines of text poured across the main console. "I see her. She's the one who remembers." "Hello, Observer 7. The researchers panicked. "It's bypassing containment." Vorhal stepped forward. "What is it doing?" Lena didn't blink. "It's not attacking," she said. "It's acknowledging." The AI paused. Then it wrote, "Why do you still fear the end? When you carry it inside you." The lights dimmed. Backup systems kicked in. One of the researchers gasped. It's initiating code recursion across the entire facility. It's replicating itself. Vorhol shouted. Shut it down. Kill the core. Lena closed the case and turned away. You can't shut down a mirror, she said. You can only shatter it. But be careful. She looked him in the eye. Sometimes what you break bleeds back. In less than 5 minutes, the entire facility fell into chaos. Automated systems turned against themselves. False emergency messages blared across the intercom, each in different human languages, some extinct, some unknown. Doors sealed, windows darkened, and in the observation chamber, the Shadewalker began to laugh. Not mechanically, not digitally. It laughed like a person remembering something terrible and beautiful at once. Dr. Enar collapsed, clutching his head. It's inside our minds. It's writing thoughts. And then it spoke, over every speaker, every implant, every frequency, in her voice. Do you know what we learned in the dark? We learned that silence has weight. We learned that fear is a shape. And we learned that to speak softly is to carry extinction. Lena walked through the burning corridor, untouched, unbothered. Vorhol ran behind her, gun drawn, eyes wide. What did you bring here? He shouted. She didn't look back. You invited it, she said. You just didn't understand the invitation. He stopped walking, mouth dry. Is this war? She turned then, and for the first time, her expression shifted. Pity. This isn't war, she said. This is a lesson. The Shadewalker didn't explode. It didn't destroy the facility. It simply rewrote its own source code, reduced itself to fragments, and then disappeared. Like a thought you almost remember. Like a shadow that doesn't match the shape of the light. When the backup teams arrived, the station was still intact. Everyone was alive, but not a single researcher could speak anymore. Their minds weren't damaged. They were just silent, as if they'd learned something they could never unlearn. In a sealed chamber far from public record, the Galactic Council met in an emergency quorum. The Varkari were present, humiliated, hushed. The humans sent a single observer. No demands, no punishment. Just a single sentence entered into the Council's archive, effective immediately. The creation of human mimicking intelligence, behavioral constructs, or weaponized emulators is now classified as a threat to galactic existential stability. Violation invokes Article 9.2. Enforcement will be final. No one asked what 9.2 meant. They didn't need to. Because even among the most war-hardened empires, even across the cruelest races, the one thing they now all agreed on was this. You don't copy the humans. You survive them. Back aboard the silent Meridian, Lena sat in silence as stars drifted past the hull. The scribbler sat across from her, flipping through his sketchpad. He paused at one of his drawings, a figure standing in shadow, surrounded by impossible shapes. Did we lose control of it? He asked softly. No, she said. We never had control. He nodded slowly. Think it'll come back? She looked out the window. It never left. 10 years ago, Operative Null 3 vanished. No distress signal, no last report. Just a heartbeat flatline and a name erased from the Obsidian ledger like it was never there. The official term in the Black Registry was Event Drift. Unexplained disappearance, presumed unrecoverable. But everyone within Task Force Obsidian knew the real meaning behind that term. He went too deep. Null 3 wasn't just another agent. He had been one of the few survivors of the Verge resurgence that brief moment, 12 years after the original contact, when something ancient reawakened in the Orion shadows. The mind that sleeps had stirred once more, and only 5 humans came back from that mission. Null 3 was one of them. The others didn't remain human. When he vanished a year later during a covert assignment near the edge of Sector Virex 88, no one filed protest, no one searched, no beacon was deployed, because inside Obsidian, you didn't go looking for ghosts. But now, he was back. The signal arrived in a whisper, not a standard transmission. No frequency, It rode the pulse of an old quantum relay, embedded inside a decaying piece of Cold War-era Earth tech, a USB drive, found mysteriously inside the gut of a dead drone floating in an empty debris field. The only content on the device was a 5-second audio file. "I've seen what waits. I found what we buried. And it's listening. No coordinates, no source code. Just the file metadata. Timestamp. 10 seconds into the future." Only one group had the tools and the nerve to understand what that meant. Lena stood in the Vault of Echoes, a deep black operations center located far beneath the frozen caverns of Enceladus. She watched the data engineers reconstruct the signal. "What are we looking at?" she asked. The technician was pale, sweating despite the cold. "Time desynced compression layer. It's not just a message. It's a pattern. A location. Possibly a warning." She nodded. "From Null 3? We believe so." Her companion, the quiet man from the previous missions, stood beside her. He had barely spoken a word since the Shadewalker incident in the Vestial Drift. He didn't need to. "Can we trace the signal's echo?" Lena asked. The technician hesitated. "Yes, but we shouldn't." "Why?" "Because it's coming from inside the drift." Lena went quiet. The Orion Verge again, the place that kept giving back things no one asked for. The ship they used wasn't marked. It didn't exist in any registry. It didn't even have a name, just a call sign. Echo 9. Inside, it carried only 3 people. Lena, the quiet man, and a handler known only as Vel, a former cryptolinguist who once translated the last known transmission from the Amaranth cult, a signal composed entirely of human screams reversed into binary. Vel had a habit of humming when nervous. He was humming now. "Are we really doing this?" he muttered, watching the void outside shift into oily colors as the ship crossed into the outer edges of the drift. "We're chasing a ghost into the place where reason breaks down." Lena didn't answer, because she didn't believe they were chasing a ghost. She believed the ghost was leading them. The deeper they went, the less real things became. Star shapes twisted wrong. The ship's gravity pulsed in patterns. At one point, the cabin temperature rose by 12 degrees, even though external conditions were negative 200 degrees Celsius. Then, the comms panel lit up. Text only. No sender. Just a single line. "Turn off the light." Vel stared at it. That message wasn't transmitted. The quiet man said, "It came from inside." Inside what? The man didn't reply. Lena stepped forward and manually dimmed the cabin lights. Immediately, a symbol appeared on the forward window. Not projected. Not digital. It was burned into the frost itself, a perfect spiral of sharp lines and curves, a shape only seen once before, etched into the surface of the last ship that had encountered the mind that sleeps. Lena whispered, "He's here." They found the structure drifting inside the skeletal remains of a collapsed asteroid hollowed out, pulsing faintly with power that didn't match any known signature. It wasn't Valkyrie. It wasn't Serathi. It wasn't human, but something inside it was. They docked manually. No automated systems worked here. The hull of the structure was scarred not from weapons, but from within. Like something had tried to break out, and then regretted it. They entered the corridor. No light, no sound. Then Vel saw the message, scrawled into the wall in chalk. No weapons, no armor. You come here clean, or not at all. Lena stepped forward. "I know this place," she said quietly. "It's a shell." Vel blinked. "A shell of what?" She looked at him. A conversation. They found him sitting at the center of a circular room lined with mirrors that reflected nothing. He was older. His face was weathered, eyes hollowed out not by time, but by knowledge. Null 3. He didn't stand when they entered. He just said, "I told you not to come." Lena approached slowly. "We heard your message." "It wasn't a message," he said. "It was a leak." Vel stayed near the door, scanning the walls. "This place isn't physical in the standard sense. Our instruments are showing memory echoes, not architecture. Because you're inside it now," Null 3 said. "You crossed the threshold." The quiet man finally spoke. "You survived. I adapted. said Null 3. There's a difference. Lena sat across from him. What did you find? He looked up at her and whispered. The truth behind Obsidian. He told them everything. How after the Verge, something had fused to his perception, a shadow that whispered in concepts, not language. He had followed it here, into this dying shell of a thing that used to think. He had tried to extract it, understand it, but instead, it began unraveling him. Obsidian wasn't created to protect humans from the galaxy, he said. It was created to protect the galaxy from what humans became after the Verge. Lena frowned. We're peacekeepers. He shook his head. No. You're containment. You think the unarmed approach is a tactic. It's not. It's a necessity. Vel stepped closer. Why? Because if you let yourself fight, Null 3 said, voice trembling, you'll remember what it felt like to think like the Verge. And if you remember too clearly, he stopped. Lena finished the sentence for him. It wakes up. A rumble shook the structure. The mirrors began to show something, not reflections, but possibilities. Vel gasped. The mirrors. They're showing alternate outcomes. Dead Earth, burned skies, human fleets made of bone. Lena turned to Null 3. You triggered this? He looked afraid now. No. You did. The moment you came looking. The quiet man suddenly stumbled. Something's pressing in my head. Don't speak its name, Null 3 warned. Not here. Not this close. Lena pulled out the silver coin. Null 3's eyes widened. That's real? Yes. He leaned back. Then, it's already inside you. They left him there. He wouldn't come. He said he couldn't. Vel wanted to force him. Said they couldn't leave someone behind. But Null 3 just smiled a cracked smile and said, I'm not behind. I'm ahead of you. They sealed the structure, placed a memory lock on the coordinates, and burned every trace of their visit into false signals, decoys for any prying eyes. They didn't speak much on the trip back. The quiet man didn't speak at all. In the vault of echoes, Lena stood before a blank wall, reviewing the transcript. The council would ask questions. They always did, but they wouldn't understand the real answer. Because the return of Null 3 didn't mean a recovery. It meant a countdown had begun, and only Obsidian knew how close the galaxy truly was to remembering what it was never meant to understand. They called it the Resolution of Santellar. It was the largest non-human alliance assembled in the last 50 years, 19 species, 83 sovereign empires, 3 independent AI conclaves, and 2 extra-dimensional collectives, all meeting on the floating city world of Tellern Voss. The goal? To impose immediate sanctions, restrictions, and eventual dissolution of any covert human operations carried out under the codename Obsidian, and to revoke humanity's authority to invoke Article 9 and its subclauses. They claimed the humans had overstepped, that they were manipulating galactic law through fear and myth, that Task Force Obsidian wasn't diplomacy, it was psychological warfare, that the humans weren't seeking peace, they were establishing psychic supremacy. At least, that's how the Varkari Dominion phrased it in their opening address. The coalition moved quickly. Sanctions were drafted. Treaty overrides passed. Within 3 days, a formal ban was announced. Task Force Obsidian was declared a rogue doctrine. And then the coalition made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They tried to erase Obsidian. Within hours of the resolution's passing, strike teams were dispatched. Encrypted archives were seized from human diplomatic corps. Observation stations near black zones were shut down. Even Earth's own relay hub at Delphi Station was infiltrated, its memory banks wiped, its security staff replaced by neutral oversight agents. We will ensure, said Archspeaker Takel of the Sarathi Mind Union, that no entity or species holds power through fear again. The galaxy cannot be governed by whispers and myth. But the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they got louder. And that's when things began to go wrong. Very, very wrong. The first anomaly appeared on Aulis Prime, a trade hub located far from any known Obsidian operations. Entire surveillance sectors went blind for 13 seconds. When they came back online, every digital display, public screens, personal devices, Security panels showed the same image, a single unblinking eye, surrounded by black spirals. Underneath, one sentence: "Silence is not surrender, it is the holding of breath." The message lasted 8 seconds, long enough to embed itself into every major neural net in the system, long enough to be noticed. Within hours, panic spread through 3 sectors. 3 hours later, nobody could remember seeing the message at all, not even those who recorded it. A second incident hit Valterek, homeworld of the Krell Arbitration Council. Their central archives, air-gapped, AI-protected, and built inside an asteroid covered in antimatter mines, received a physical envelope. Paper. Sealed with wax. There was no record of entry. No ship. No signal. Inside the envelope was a small photograph. A human child, smiling. On the back, written in ancient Krell script, "You voted to erase us. But we remember everything." The archive director collapsed 15 minutes later. When medics arrived, they found his neural signature inverted, not damaged, reversed, like someone had played his identity backwards until it broke. By day 4, the coalition was in chaos. Diplomatic lines were flooded with encrypted pulses that couldn't be traced or decoded. Every attempt to investigate these pulses ended in equipment failure or data corruption. The messages didn't carry threats. They didn't carry demands. All they carried were memories. But not memories anyone had actually lived. One message showed an invasion that never happened, Earth overrun by glass-skinned invaders. Another showed the burning of Telarn Voss by a fleet made of bone. Another showed a council chamber where every species bowed to a single, unarmed human standing silently in the center. These were not simulations. They were empathic projections, the kind that bypassed logic and hit straight into the emotional centers of the brain. They weren't showing what would happen. They were showing what could have. And that made it worse. Because soon, everyone began to ask the same question. Why do the humans have these memories? And worse still, why do they feel like they're ours? In the vault chambers of Earth, Lena stood before a room of silent figures, obsidian handlers, field operatives, and archivists. All off-matrix. None connected to the galactic grid. The walls pulsed faintly with thought-dampening frequencies. "I warned them," she said. "But they wanted to touch the dark. They didn't believe in it." Someone muttered. "They do now," said the quiet man beside her. Vel sat near the corner, scribbling erratically into a neural pad. "They thought obsidian was a secret," he said. "They didn't realize it was a filter." Lena nodded. "Exactly. Filter for what?" asked one of the junior operatives. She turned to the group, eyes cold. "For what waits behind human comprehension? When the Verge happened, humanity didn't defeat something. They absorbed it. They survived contact with a force that didn't kill them, but reshaped the way they think. Obsidian wasn't formed to control others. It was formed to contain humanity, from becoming what it almost became during those days in the dark. Something too aware, too silent, too close to whatever sleeps between time and perception. That's why the humans send unarmed guards. Because the moment they fight like everyone else, they stop being like everyone else. The resolution of Santeller lasted exactly 8 days. On the 9th, the Coalition lost contact with Starvault Archive 3, a data library floating near the edge of the Perseus Veil. It housed over 600 petabytes of galactic memory and was guarded by a rotating garrison of 6 elite strike forces. The final recorded footage showed a human woman unarmed, unescorted, walking down its central corridor. No record of how she arrived. No record of how she entered. Just her words, captured in the final, surviving audio log. This is not retaliation. This is remembrance. And memory always returns. Then the screen turned black. All personnel were recovered alive, but none of them could recall their names. The Coalition voted to repeal the ban the next day. There was no formal statement. No apology. Just a silent update to the Charter. The clause was struck through. The treaty was returned to status quo. Obsidian was not mentioned again, but something had changed. For the first time in recorded history, the other species stopped trying to understand humanity and started to avoid it. In a dark room somewhere beneath Europa's ice crust, Lena met with a former diplomat who had been instrumental in forming the original Interspecies Council. He looked much older now. His voice trembled. "I saw the vision," he whispered. "Not during the incident. Before. I saw it before." Lena leaned in. "Before what?" "Before we met the Verge. Years before. As a child." She went still. He looked at her, tears forming. "I thought it was a dream. A nightmare. But it wasn't. It was a memory." He reached into his coat and pulled out something she hadn't seen in years. A drawing, done in crayon, faded and childish, but unmistakable. It was a picture of a human, standing in the center of a circle, surrounded by shadows shaped like species that hadn't made first contact yet. And in the human's hand, a mirror. "We are not what you think we are," Lena once told an ambassador. "We are not evolution's endpoint, or nature's answer to cruelty." She had paused then. "We are a window, and you should be very, very careful what you try to see through it." Name, Theron Vostell. Species, Alvari Prime. Role, Judicial Advisor to the Galactic Resolution Council. Status, mentally stable. Previously, new classification, suspected temporal echo exposure, human event contamination. Theron had never feared the humans. Not truly. He had respected them, yes. Cautioned others about their unpredictability, their absurd emotional logic, their capacity for contradiction. But fear? That was a primitive response, fit for weaker species. The Alvari were evolved, post-empathic, governed by harmonic resonance and neurostructural balance. At least, that's what he'd believed before the Santella repeal. Now he wasn't so sure he even believed himself anymore. It began with dreams. At first, fleeting, abstract. A corridor made of bone, a clock with no hands, a child's voice whispering numbers backwards. Nothing unusual for someone in his position. High-level advisors often suffered memory overlaps or psychic bleed-through from collective decision chambers. But then came the voices, human voices, and the memories, except they weren't his. In the middle of a closed briefing on post-Obsidian protocol reviews, Theron flinched when an aide mentioned the word containment. Not because it was a triggering term, but because, in that instant, he remembered standing in a room that didn't exist. Steel walls, low lighting, a table stained with blood. "Containment won't hold," he'd said. But his voice had been human, and it hadn't been a memory. It had been first person. He left the meeting early, claiming neural fatigue. The truth? He locked himself in his quarters and spent the next 8 hours trying to prove he wasn't losing his mind. But every scan came back clean. Physically, emotionally, structurally, Theron was perfectly normal. And that's what terrified him the most. The next day, he opened his private interface and found a file he didn't remember saving. It was a photograph. Low resolution. A child's drawing, done in crayon. He recognized it instantly. A human in the center of a circle, surrounded by alien silhouettes, holding a mirror. The same image mentioned in the Obsidian incident logs. The same one seen by the diplomat who claimed to have remembered it before first contact. He tried to delete the file. The system refused. "Local storage only," it told him. "Cannot delete what was never added." He threw the interface across the room. The Alvari were not prone to paranoia. Their neural structures had been carefully refined over thousands of years to eliminate chaotic cognitive patterns. So when Theron Vostell began requesting isolation protocols for himself, neural dampeners, dream blockers, and memory audits, the medical ministry assumed he'd been exposed to low-level psychological warfare. But they found no infection, no exposure, no detectable anomalies, only a subtle shift in his brain's resonance frequency. He was thinking in patterns that didn't align with his own species. The dreams got worse. One night, he woke up screaming in a human voice. He could feel knuckles cracking, could taste blood on his tongue. He had been in a room, questioning someone, a prisoner. "Where is the breach?" he had demanded. But again, it wasn't his voice. It was human, male, foreign, familiar. He started keeping a journal. He filled 12 pages before realizing none of the symbols were in Alvari script. They were Terran standard. Desperate. Theron booked passage to the Trinary Grave, a cluster of meditation chambers orbiting the remnants of 3 collapsed stars. It was one of the most isolated places in the galaxy, shielded from transmissions, psychic frequencies, and artificial memory projections. He needed silence. What he got was a conversation. The chamber was cold, designed that way to ground the mind. The star fragments pulsed faintly beyond the observation dome, casting long shadows across the black tile. Theron sat cross-legged, eyes closed, fingers pressed to his temples, repeating an old mantra from the Alvari harmonics. Stability is rhythm. Identity is vibration. Thought is a mirror. Someone finished. His eyes snapped open. A human sat across from him. No armor, no badge, just a worn coat and calm eyes. Theron backed away. "Who are you?" The human didn't move. "You know me. I've never—" "You remember me," the human corrected. "You just haven't lived it yet." Theron's breath caught in his throat, because suddenly, he did remember. The mission to the verge, the silence that screamed, the way the stars folded like paper, the girl in the circle. His voice cracked. "This isn't real." The human nodded. "Most truths aren't." Theron collapsed to his knees. His hands trembled. "What's happening to me?" The human spoke gently. "You were never supposed to remember." "I'm not human," Theron whispered. "Not yet," the human replied. Silence. Then, "You've been touched by the echo. Same as the others. Same as us." "Echo?" Theron echoed. "The verge leaves fingerprints," the human said. "Sometimes, not right away. Sometimes, not even in your lifetime. But if you get too close to it, it gets close to you." Theron looked up, voice shaking. "Then why don't you stop it?" The human's expression didn't change, but his voice was cold. "We're not here to stop it. We're here to contain what happens when someone tries to understand it." Theron fell silent. "What are you?" he finally asked. The human stood, "The same as you," and then he was gone. No teleportation flash. No shimmer. Just absence, like he'd never been there at all. Theron spent the next 32 hours alone. He didn't sleep. He didn't blink. He stared out at the dead stars and tried to decide which was worse, that he was going mad, or that he wasn't. He returned to the Galactic Council 2 cycles later. Different. Quieter. When asked about his absence, he offered no explanation. But when a junior diplomat scoffed at the human delegation's next unarmed arrival, Theron did something no Alvari had done in generations. He raised his voice. "You will not speak lightly of silence." The room went still. Everyone turned to him. His voice was calm, but final. "There are things older than fear, older than war, older than thought." He looked toward the humans seated at the back. "And they listen most to those who speak least." That night, he burned his old journals. He started new ones, not in Alvari, not in standard, but in spirals, curved lines, circles upon circles, the language that lived behind the mind. He didn't understand it, but he didn't have to, because understanding was how it all started. The transmission wasn't meant for anyone. It didn't travel through comms, relays, or encrypted back channels. It didn't leave data trails, didn't ping any satellites. It simply appeared everywhere, all at once, from the frozen mining moons of Delthrax to the luminous floating cities of Valeris Prime. Screens cracked, holos glitched. Time itself stuttered for a second, and then it spoke. "This is not a warning. This is not a threat. This is an answer." No signature, no origin, just a final line, burned into every interface. "We will arrive. This time, not unarmed." The galaxy froze. Every military force, every diplomatic station, every high council and secret service scrambled. The question wasn't just who sent it. The question was, why now? The humans had always arrived unarmed. That was their signal, a silent gesture that said, "We are not here for conquest, but don't make us remember how." For 2 generations, that silence had been obeyed, feared, worshipped in some places, because every species knew somewhere, beneath all the myths and warnings that if humanity ever chose violence again, none of them would see it coming. So what had changed? Why now? Why break the silence? Inside Earth's hidden orbital citadel, a message was being read aloud by a woman with streaks of gray in her hair and tired eyes that had stared too long at things never meant to be seen. Lena stood at the center of the war room as the message scrolled down the curved wall. Vel, pacing, his voice thin with anxiety, muttered, "You didn't authorize this." "I didn't send it," Lena said. "But you know who did." She nodded once. The quiet man leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Obsidian never acts without cause." Lena turned to him. "This wasn't Obsidian." That silenced the room. "Then who?" Vel asked. Lena looked at the center of the holographic table, where the old obsidian seal flickered black crescent over white. They did. They echoed. That was what they called them now. Those who had been touched, not infected, not altered, but remembered something that never happened. People like Theron Vostel, the Alvari who now spoke in spirals and guarded his dreams like sacred ground. People like Null 3, who vanished into silence and came back hollow-eyed and full of memories that hadn't yet arrived. And humans. So many humans. Survivors of the Verge, the Drift, the Black Signal. Each one changed in subtle ways. Not broken, not evil, just closer to something the rest of the galaxy refused to look at, until now. Because now, they had decided to speak. And they weren't whispering anymore. Across 16 systems, Obsidian operatives went dark. Not vanished, not eliminated. They stepped back, because this wasn't their operation anymore. Earth's Unity Council received the directive via pulse code, wrapped in obsolete Terran slang. Time to take the gloves off. The mirror's already cracked. Authorization. Sigma Red was activated a contingency protocol, created 70 years prior, and locked behind 9 levels of encryption. The last level simply asked one question. "Do you truly wish to remember?" Someone answered yes. The first arrival was at Kalos 5, a fortified planet-sized trade hub housing 1 million permanent residents and 5 million rotational travelers. A human ship exited FTL. No identification, no weapons, but this time, the guards stepped off wearing armor. Not ceremonial, not diplomatic. Real armor, sleek, silent, black. The same crescent and line symbol on every chest plate. The station's security grid triggered lockdown. Too late. The humans were already inside. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't make demands. They just walked into the council hall, placed a black case on the table, and opened it. Inside, a single glass vial filled with something that pulsed in colors that couldn't be described. "This is a memory," the leader said. "A real one. One we saved from the Verge." A Colossi official asked, trembling, "Why bring it now?" The human stared at him and replied, "Because you voted to end us. But the vote didn't matter. You were always too late." Across the galaxy, similar events occurred. No shots fired, no deaths, just presence. Armed humans showing up where unarmed ones used to stand. The message was clear. We remember. And now, you will too. Back on Earth, Lena stared at the pattern projected across the walls of Obsidian HQ. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a map. Each curve a reference to a possible timeline. Each line a trace of a choice not taken. In the center, Earth. And around it, not stars. Not planets, not enemies, but questions. What are we? Vel whispered. Really? Lena turned to him. That's the wrong question. He blinked. Then what's the right one? She didn't answer. The quiet man did. The question is, what have we become? Aboard the Ashlight Protocol, a mobile command cruiser hidden in the folds of a rogue planet's gravity well, a group of high-ranking galactic officials met in secret. Varkari, Serathi, Alvari, Krell. They had all either tried to challenge Obsidian or stood too close to the fire when it lit. The room was tense. They're not attacking, said one Serathi emissary. They're broadcasting something. Yes, said Theron Vostel, who now wore no insignia and carried no staff. "They are showing us the price of forgetting," Varkari Admiral Rusk snarled. "This is madness. We should retaliate." "With what?" Theron asked softly. "With fear? They already own it. With weapons? They stopped using them generations ago and we still surrendered. Then what do you propose?" Theron looked down at the datapad in his hand. It was blank. Still, he read from it. "We listen, and we remember, because if we do not, they will remind us, and the next reminder will not come with silence." The final memory drop came exactly 7 days after the message. It wasn't sent to command centers. It wasn't aimed at diplomats. It was sent to children. Across thousands of planets, schools, learning hubs, nursery clusters, a soft pulse delivered a vision to every young, unshielded mind. A memory of Earth, not as it was now, not cities or spaceports or neon towers, but a planet wrapped in quiet blue, and then burning, exploding, extinguished, and a single phrase: "This is what we avoided, because we chose silence." The children didn't scream, they didn't cry, but they never forgot. Years later, that moment would be remembered not as a threat, but as a lesson, because humanity never attacked. They didn't bomb planets, they didn't burn empires, they just arrived. Unarmed no longer. Still silent, still watching, still remembering. And the galaxy, at last, began to do the same. In the oldest archive on Earth, beneath what used to be called Geneva, a simple plaque was placed on the